Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. I'm Rick Levine, Executive Director here at the NAUND, Network Association of Uniform Manufacturers and Distributors. These lovely people around me on the screen are from Aptean and are here to talk to us today about automating the manufacturing process. And Frank is from a equipment manufacturer and supplier, and well, I'll let Emily introduce everyone. But I wanted to just let me bear with me, everyone, and I'm going to give a quick commercial for the NAUMD. I know it sounds like I already started that, but we are a uniform, image apparel, and workwear network. We're not giant, about 200 companies involved. Each year we do a in-person convention. It's coming up in the late April in New Orleans. We have events running throughout the year. One of them you're at, a webinar. And we run a members portal where there's about 500 profiles of industry members who are connecting in various ways. Um, we publish news. We give out awards each year. We have network groups to learn from each other, share best practices. I mentioned the convention. We have a massive growing library with recordings such as this webinar today, but there's at least 100 hours of recordings in there, hundreds of articles on the industry. So if you're a manufacturer or a distributor or a company that serves this industry, such as Aptean with technology solutions, then we encourage you to learn more about our network. So that's the commercial. I'm going to turn it over to Emily Scales from Aptean to tell us more about who's on today.
Perfect. Thank you, Rick. Let me pull up my screen. Okay. Can everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Alrighty. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you, Rick. Thank you for everybody who's joined us today. We're excited to have you here for our webinar, Smart Automation, Overcoming Key Apparel Manufacturing Hurdles. This session, it will be led by our expert panelists, Anthony Mele, Justin Hershoran, Per Bringle from Aptean, and then along with our special guest, Frank Henderson, President of Henderson Sewing Machine Co. Throughout the webinar, we do encourage everyone to submit questions via the Zoom chat feature. We'll also address them at the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So now let's meet our panelists. Anthony, would you mind starting us off with a brief introduction?
Yeah, appreciate everyone joining us today. My name is Anthony Mealy. I'm Regional Account Director at Aptean. Specifically Aptean Apparel. I've spent about the past 20 years in both the fashion and tech spaces. Actually started on the wholesale side and managing fashion brands, so lived it, breathed it. But one day while doing that, I was in our fancy New York City showroom and staring at a pile of expensive lookbooks that you can imagine the cost that goes into that. Photo shoots, the models, printing. And when you're in those fancy New York City buildings, a lot of times they've got garbage chutes, recycling chutes. So those extra lookbooks, you can guess where they went, down the recycling chute. Uh, just felt there had to be a better way to do that. That's actually how I moved over to the tech side, looking to solve for digitizing lookbooks, line sheets, enabling buyers to actually make orders right from those lookbooks and line sheets, enable sales reps to actually use that as a tool out in the marketplace to take orders, tailor those things specific to the buyer, merchandise them for the buyer. So yes, there was a better way. And that brought me joy, right? I like solving and creating efficiencies for the brands and the vendors. So fast forward to today, now leading the new business team for Aptean Apparel Solutions across the portfolio. And I've been lucky enough to be surrounded by a bunch of industry experts that help get me there and have a wealth of knowledge, such as these other three gentlemen about to share some good information on automation with you. So with that, I'll hand it over to Justin Hershoran. And I'd say these guys with me, we've probably been at about a few hundred factory floors, just to give you an idea.
Hi, I'm Justin Hershoran. And Anthony, you are dead on about the idea of taking an old way of doing things and rethinking and coming up with a better way. And that's basically what we've done on the Aptean shop floor side. We come from the industry. We've been in the industry since the 1990s. We come from a part of the industry that's more hardware focused, that had software, of course, involved with it. And we always saw a need for more on the data collection side and reporting and real time. And that's where we came up with the idea of shop floor control. And since then, we have joined Anthony and his team. We have been a critical part of the apparel manufacturing side. We bring real-time data from the shop floor, from production, up to the company, like whether it's ERP or the staff. We also handle everything in relation to incentive pay, payroll, even if it's hourly and salary, and relating that from production, through all of the other facets of the business. And we've been going strong now with Anthony. How long has it been? I guess it's been about 9 years.
9 years, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're close to the 10-year mark. So we've had some great experiences, spent a lot of time in factories, and we've pretty much seen everything. And I can pass this on to Per Bringle now.
Thanks, Justin. I'm Per Bringle. Been with the shop floor team since the get-go, some 10 years ago, and been working with Justin way longer than that. Been in the stone products industry since the early mid 90s, and kind of a little funny side story. I reached out to Frank some weeks ago, Frank Henderson, to talk about this specific seminar, and I said, Frank, you've been talking about automation for the last 20 years. You should join us in this seminar. And Frank said, Per, 20 years? That's because you've only known me for 20 years. I've been talking about automation way longer than that. So we go back a long time, and we strive from helping manufacturers get more efficient in any aspect of their business. Everyone talks about apparel manufacturing. I tend to talk about sewn products manufacturing, because it's really what it is, right? It's not necessarily just apparel. It's anything sewn products that we are experts in, and Frank can attest to that as well, right? So I'm here to help answer any questions you may have, and chime in when I can. My side of the business is on the implementation, integration, and product development. So I'm here to help with anything I can. Pass it over to you, Frank.
Thanks, Per, and Justin, Anthony, Emily. Certainly my pleasure to be here. As Per said, yes, I'm an old guy, and this starts my 51st year. So I feel like I was born in the industry because my father, grandfather, both in prior years, both deceased now, were in the industry. So I've been around the textile sewn products industry all of my life. So skip stitches, breaking the thread, how do we make products more efficiently and effectively, which kind of brings us around to where we are today. I met Per, as he said, and Justin a number of years ago as we collaborated back and forth, helping customers, and that's what it's all about. So I say to each of you on this call today, if your plant looks the same as it did 10 years ago, you need to get in the now generation, because the rest of the world is. If it looks the same as it did 20 or 30 years ago, then you certainly need to, because each of us, whether we manufacture uniforms or any type of textile sewn product, have to know and understand that today it's about efficiency and addressing labor gaps and reducing waste. And how do we make products more efficiently and effectively? And the way we do that is by what we're talking about here today. And that's integration of technology and automation into the process of sewing products. Sewn products manufacturing is not about how much you're going to keep in your building, but how fast you get it through. And being able to track that product through from the time that it's designed until the product is cut, until it is sewn and distributed. That's where shop floor control integrates in with what we do from an automation standpoint. So I'm going to stop right there as we go forward.
Frankie, you played right into our tagline at Aptean. I loved it. Ready for what's next now.
Awesome. All right, let's move on to our presentation. Anthony, do you want to kick us off with kind of going through the
Yeah.
challenges?
So,
in
as a group,
construction?
right, we were talking about how we've walked and been to hundreds of factory floors. Of late, these are just three of the topics that consistently bubble up. Right? We hear a lot that it's hard to find and recruit good talent, especially in sewing labor, and how do you keep those operators, and just how do you close the labor gaps? And then, in addition to that, right, just working efficiently with your materials, less waste, which ties into that third topic, sustainable business practices. And with Frank, right, we're really going to blend how do we put software and robotics together to really tackle that.
So really, when you look at how the software industry works, especially when it comes to controlling what's happening in your production, there's a vast difference between what ERP and MES systems can do and what shop floor control and actual like equipment and hardware are capable of doing. And it's kind of like if you think of what an iceberg is, the ERP and MES really just tackles the tip of the iceberg when you're looking at actual production. If you need to get into granular details, that's where you start, diving into, all of the intricate ins and outs of production and shop floor control in production. And we have a good example on the next slide, Emily, which actually shows how production should look in the modern age. And when you think about what's involved in manufacturing whatever product you're making, whether it's apparel or just soft goods for other industries, home fashion, furniture, you have people that are working with machines, and there's very little correlation between those machines and everything else that's in the business. And what happens in this video, as you can see, is you see an employee working at the workplace. They're actually physically sewing and assembling a product, and they're simply just using labels. In this case, they're QR codes to scan what they're working on. But that scan can do so much more. In this case, it's giving them some visual feedback, and it's also reporting, on a scan by scan basis, what's being produced back to other systems in the company, like, for example, ERP. But if you really dive deep into what can and should be happening on the production floor, it's everything else that is in between that scan and the machine and what you're actually making. So, for example, let's say you're manufacturing something and you're using a smart piece of equipment that can self-adjust based on what it is that you're manufacturing. And right now you're making shirts and you're going to switch to pants. The old way of doing things is to call a mechanic over who's going to refit the machine to be able to produce whatever the pant is that you're making. And that could be a simple process that takes 10 or 15 minutes. It could be a complex process that takes, an hour or several hours. But there's no reason why that scan, for example, can't then send a file or send information to the machine that actually lets the machine self-adjust for that new product. And that's part of what we're here to talk about. How you can use the software and the hardware and equipment to be able to, close some of the labor gaps, to help in areas where you're overextending with your maintenance or with your supervision, to be able to set up machines to make these simple shifts in production.
So Justin, just to tie in that key word of automation, right? At a high level, it's automating the collection of the data out on the floor, right? Automating, giving that real-time feedback to engineers as well as operators, supervisors, right? So on both sides of the table, as well as automating the delivery of information, right? To create those efficiencies both out on the floor and with decision making.
Exactly. Yeah, and also when it comes to delivering that information, this crosses everything that's being done in the business. So everything from payroll to quality control to how it interacts with the actual equipment. Because when you think about it, you have all of this equipment that generally is standalone, and you've got people that are operating the different machines and equipment on the production floor. And in this case, with having integration and correlation with software systems such as shop floor control, a lot of those features and functions can be automated, just like payroll can be automated, and quality control and planning and scheduling and everything else that is required to have an efficient operation can be done with these tools.
And then we'll tie it to one more point before we move on there, right? Closing the labor gap. So we see, right, delivery of information. I'm sure Frank could attest to this. We've got a lot of manufacturers in the audience. You walk the floor, you see a lot of operators writing down what they did so that they know they're being tracked appropriately. This brings them that level of transparency and visibility to see how they're being tracked. So they know they're being tracked accurately, typically then not writing stuff down, right? Small efficiency gains right there alone. But at the same time, you've got good operators. You're putting in a position to typically earn more, right? And it creates that trust between the employer and the employee. So just calling out that whole closing labor gaps and how this plays into that as well.
And of course, there's the side of, many companies don't have technology in production. So when it comes to labor gaps and trying to win over employees, you tend to run into a great scenario where employees are less likely to leave, less turnover, because they want to work for a company that has these tools. They want to work for a company that is able to collect this data, where they trust the payroll. They can see what they're earning in real time. Everything is just right in front of them on the screen. And as you see in this video, they don't have to touch anything on the screen. Everything is just there. The company decides what is shown to them, but essentially they can see everything from what they're being credited for to what they're actually working on, and some of the nuances about that, whether there's a document or there's information about what they're doing that they need to see, like, settings, colors, sizes, materials, different things like that.
Yeah, so I mean, we go on and on about what the system itself could do, right? We've got line balancing and just different ways of training. But let's get to the cool stuff where we sort of use this to drive the machines and how we can interact and get to Frank's automation piece and robotics, the cool stuff.
So when we look at the nature of software in general, it gives you the ability to drive different devices. I'm sure many of you out there have some sort of smart device in your house, smart switches to turn on something, a light or a coffee maker. And in this case, in production, we can take that same technology, stuff that you could just buy off of Amazon, and connect it to production. So for example, somebody clocks in at their workplace, that could turn their lights on. That can power up their machine. That can, send a report to their supervisor that they've started working. There's many things that can happen just from simply clocking into a workplace using automation. And that, of course, goes down to the actual equipment, to Frank Henderson's world, where not only can we, start up machines and start up lights, but then we can actually send information to those machines so that those machines are ready to do their job. So, like, if you think of, for example, the world of embroidery or knitting, you've got one person who's running, many, many machines or many heads. That this is a way for them to have better organization and control out on the production floor. And imagine taking this type of practice of using these smart switches or other devices that are out there in the marketplace, and applying like sustainable practices to it. Reporting that can show you things like how much power are you consuming, or how much power are you saving by using these type of switches and this type of technology? Because as we progress in the world, obviously one of the big progressions is the fact that everything that we're doing in production is power hungry. So we start looking at different features, not just the labor side, but also the machinery and the electronic side of what are the costs to operate your business, and how can you become more efficient and address those type of things. This is an imaginary idea. Imagine the future where you are able to replace different automatic sewing areas with robotics, which is another thing that Frank Henderson has been working very closely with. Frank, do you want to talk a little bit about the robotic side and how that can make companies offer them more efficiencies and greater productivity?
Sure. Thanks, Justin. What robotics actually does is robotics becomes a material handling device. If you remember the videos that Justin just showed, where the shop floor was actually integrated into it, what you saw was a bunch of ladies' hands. Her hands were grasping the fabric, moving the fabric through the path of the machine. The robot or automation is actually a material handling function of sewing. You're not changing the sewing machine, just like this person, which is a robot here, is not changing what's happening there. We're going to fold that with the use of automation technology, in this case, a dual arm robot or a cobot that can work alongside a person. You aren't taking the job away, you're doing the job for. So you're able to use your trained, skilled people and use a robot to actually move fabrics through the path of the machine. Some of the other things that Justin was just talking about were the ability for the Aptean software to actually send to the machine a set of credentials which says, I'm sewing this fabric, I'm sewing it this stitches per inch. Here's what the pressure needs to be on the presser foot. Here's what the tension structure needs to be. And if those devices on the sewing machine itself are digital, then we can actually control that. So we're embedding that into a file that's actually coming to the machine. It's actually helping the machine do the setup. That's what Justin was referring to. What used to happen in the past is a mechanic had to adjust the tensions on the machine. They're digital today. A mechanic had to adjust the pressure on a presser foot. Those are digital today. The stroke of the feed bar moving the fabric through, if you're doing it with a robot, the robot's actually controlling what that stitch length is. So the ability to automate, to integrate into your facility those mundane, repetitive motion manufacturing tasks, all of that is driven by a digital platform, which is what the shop floor control does and is. It's the tool that enables us to drive the automation technology to manufacture products with less human intervention.
And Frank, I like the way you said it. You're not taking away the operator, right? You're working alongside. I know Justin and I were recently at a factory that was using automation to hem sleeves on, and you still have the operator going over there and loading and just making sure things are working correctly. It's almost a hybrid role of mechanic operator at some of these, but the efficiencies are through the roof because it could sew a lot faster that way than just a human on its own.
And
oh, sorry.
less total people so that it's not as much of a labor gap. You're using the skilled people that you have or the skilled people that you'll train, which is, by the way, a new sewing operator, not just somebody who's going to do a particular thing. As Justin said, you're attracting people who want to be involved in the digital world, who want to be involved with shop floor control, who want to be involved with, I can see what's happening, what I'm contributing to the overall good of this company. And yes, those are the things that we're looking for. So if you could run a plant that used to be 300 people with 30 to 50 people today, and you can, by utilizing the tools that we're talking about here, with less total labor, but a higher skilled set of labor.
Well, and it's funny because when you really think about that, Frank, I mean, you remember back in the 90s and the early 2000s and before that, how it was always about cutting the workforce. Like, how can you use technology and equipment and machines to cut the workforce to lower your expenses and increase your profitability? And now, since then, and really since I feel like since 2005, 2006, that's really when we started to see that the labor force is so diminished in our industry, and it's so difficult to find trained labor, anybody who can run any of these machines, that now we are being forced to become much more creative in finding labor and finding experienced labor. And of course, using robots and machinery to be able to try to replace some of that. So today, it's not about trying to cut the workforce; it's trying to increase production with your existing workforce and become more efficient.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's it. This is a very, very new automated piece of machinery called Fast Sewn, developed by a friend of mine and myself. We've been talking about this for several years. That is, why don't we have a piece of sewing equipment that not only sews, but actually cuts? So that's what this system is actually about. Fast Sewn system actually takes two pieces of fabric, feeds them into the machine, being held down basically with vacuum, so that we can actually sew and then turn around and cut the fabric together. I think we'll see more of this type of technology as time goes on, and the ability to automate more and more products. So there's tons of different things that we actually just join one piece of fabric to another. And by the way, why not have the ability to sew something and then cut it? And we've done that in a few cases in the past, and I think it'll become more and more popular. So what the videos are actually showing you is, this is a particular lock stitch. We can change the sewing head itself to any number of different things. As the needle bar drive system is driven by a servo motor, the hook system or looper system is driven by a separate servo motor system, and electronics actually tell the machine what to do. So it's very, very similar to a CNC cutting platform, but it is both a cutting and a sewing platform. This is only one of the new things that you'll see coming forward in the future as more and more automation technology are integrated into the process. But what drives this is what shop floor does. This is driven by a digital stream of information that says, go here, do this. What we might have seen in the past with the DXF file format, only it's a true digital format that shows us what we're going to sew and what we're going to cut.
And Frank, what blows me away, right? Stat right there, 1,000 stitches per minute. You look at that and you're doing two jobs at once essentially here. I would have to believe the accuracy is there so that there is less waste, right? Bringing it back to the whole sustainability factor. I'll play devil's advocate for a second though, right? You've got power driving these robotics, these machines, right? I hear that a lot. But when you think about the efficiencies that it's creating and how fast it can work, you end up using less power. So it more than levels itself out. What's your take on that?
Yes, you are correct, Anthony. And this is the first system of its kind that I'm aware of anywhere in the world. It is patented technology. The ability to actually sew and cut. Yes, there's efficiencies. And we can minimize the amount of waste. We as an industry are the second largest polluter. Ecologically, we're a nightmare because we dye a bunch of stuff, we throw a bunch of stuff away, and we either have to separate it by mechanical means or chemical means or whatever, and most of it does not go back into the original form or has to be original fiber or whatever added to it. This is an opportunity for us to think outside the box. Systems like this will become more and more effective. Interesting thing to me is if we ask most people in plants today, do you drive the same car that you did 10 years ago? They look at you and laugh. Or do you have the same phone that you did 5 years ago? They look at you and laugh. Yet we expect manufacturing facilities in the textile sewn products are using equipment that's 20, 30, and 40 years old. So we have to change that. And the way to change that is what we're talking about here today, the ability to collaborate across lines in order to affect positively what customers are doing by using automation and technology, and use the skilled labor that we have and systems like this to be able to do more with less.
There you go. That kind of led us right into that, Emily.
Recycling. Yeah, we as an industry produce a ton of CO2 equivalents, as we say. We have closed loop recycling and open loop recycling, and these are the two predominant methods. The problem with almost all of the recycling and that kind of thing is we have to collect it. You got to collect it, you got to sort it. If we look at what that amounts to is if a product is a pair of jeans, it has a zipper in it. That zipper has to be removed. Or if it has metal components, brads, those kind of things, they have to be removed. And then if we have a cotton product and it's sewn together with the polyester thread, then that has to be separated at some point in time. So the two predominant ways are what you listed here. There's closed loop recycling, open loop recycling. But we produce a lot of waste within our industry. One thing is we overproduce. So the standard model for most brands, retailers, manufacturers today is that they overproduce. We bring into this country 98% of what is actually sold. The first thing we do is throw away 30% of it. 30% of it is thrown away into a landfill, and therefore we're polluting across the whole world a tremendous amount. If you go to the next slide. We're talking about here how to produce less with less people. So here we're actually looking at picking up a t-shirt product, loading it into, whether it's a uniform or a t-shirt or the jacket that you have on, Anthony. If we look at most textile sewn products, about 70 to 75% of those operations to make that product are in a two-dimension. They're flat. We can automate those predominantly today. It's very difficult to automate all of the dimensional aspects. We all have different shapes and sizes of our bodies. What we've done here is this was actually an ARM project, Advanced Robotics for Manufacturing, where we actually integrated with robotic arms, and we've since done it with just one. Developed a specialized end effector to actually pick up this tubular, in this case, t-shirt product, load it into a machine that actually sews the automatic bottom in. So I say to you, how many people do you actually see here? All of this system here can be driven by what Aptean does. It's a digital stream controlled by a digital algorithm that is sent through to the machine that says, pick up this, load it into this machine, and do the following. That's the picture of what we'll all look like in the future. Walking around with an Excel spreadsheet all over a plant needs to be replaced by what Justin, Per, Anthony, and the people at Aptean do. Go ahead, Justin.
I know. I guess in this case, like you can actually like load a program that would tell it specifically where the pickup points are. So if you switch from like a small shirt to a triple XL, those pickup points are going to change, right? But based on that scan, that could simply send the data to the arms that relocate where the pickup point is. And it's interesting that you're showing that you showed this video because Per and I actually have a lot of experience in history in our pre-shop floor days working with companies that had automatic pickups that were picking up like bedding and different things like flat sheets, flat pillowcases, different things like that, using robotic arms and stuff like that. And that was a while ago. That was back in um, what, late 90s, early 2000s?
Yep. No, you were exactly right. And yes, what you've described is correct. We
Yeah,
have size, small, medium, large, extra large, whatever. The machine doesn't really care what you're loading into it. It's simply saying, pick me up, load me into this piece of machinery,
yeah.
and machinery will sew the product. You can actually say even from your app. So this many stitches, here's what the circumference is. There's lots of different data points that we can. The other thing is we're recording how many are sewn, how many are first quality. We could tie a camera system into the quality aspect of it. At the end of the cycle as it's going, we could actually track what kind of quality product that we're producing. And in some products, like airbags, for instance, it's vital that we capture each one and store that information from a safety standpoint. Okay.
So in that case, the camera could actually, once it captures it, if it sees a defect, it could actually report the defect through shop floor. And then you've got the basically the digital paper trail that tracks all the way back up to your ERP.
And if there's a defect, you want the machine stopped, not to produce off standard or second quality.
Right.
Stop so the machine is fixed, and then you start the machine back up, obviously.
Yeah, what's interesting is the experience that we had like in the late 90s and early 2000s. Back then, if you had to change size, pick up something different, you had to actually go and reprogram the machine, just like you had to with the old school, sewing machines and different things like that. Whereas, today you can send like a digital file, and the machine has the smarts to be able to make those adjustments on its own once it receives the new instructions, in a sense. The quality is an interesting, having a digitized quality system, I think, would be a really interesting thing to talk about here, because I feel like a lot of companies, um, obviously they have a strong focus on quality, especially when you're looking at the, contract manufacturers for, defense or for, workwear or, utilities or different things like that. And to be able to have something that can, digitally look at something and see, if a specific defect exists, and also have that paper trail, like, with having the pictures to be able to relate back to, after the fact.
Agreed. And we want to build quality into a product. Uniforms have a lot of different operations. If you're looking at pants, shirts, whatever, you have pockets, you have flaps. Sometimes you have epaulets, you have cargo pockets, you have lots of different operations. So we want to start building quality into it at operation one so that we know that we have accurate repeatability because of automation and technology integration, robotics or otherwise, whether it's hard automation or flexible automation. So we're building quality into it, and we can verify that quality so that we know what we're sending to the second operation, or third, or fourth, or fifth, are all verified. Verified meaning the components that we're actually giving to the next operation are the same. When we do that with a manual operation, it's very, very difficult to have, and almost impossible, to have each one be exactly the same. However, robots and automated systems are really good at repeatability, doing the same thing over and over and over, and each one of them are exactly the same. So therefore, we're building the quality into the product one step at a time.
And Frank, I'd say to Justin's point, Per and I were at a factory. This was probably 2 months ago already, but they were talking about 1% increase in quality, and to me, it just sounded like such a finite number. Hey, that's not a big deal, but they were just appreciative of how much that impacts their bottom line because less materials used, right? Less reworks. So when you have clients that are combining both of these from the software and robotics perspective, especially, it's big savings. 1% if you're doing a lot of volume, and some fashion manufacturers are, and especially in uniforms when you're working with or workwear or survival gear, where the materials are very costly, right? Each item creates a lot. There's a lot of steps in each product being made. Um, Again, big savings there.
That's correct. And just
Yeah,
think
you know,
about the
oh,
weight
sorry.
stream. We save a little bit, it makes a tremendous difference over the month and over the year.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. You know, we were the same factory we were in. I remember there was an operation where they had employees who were just doing one repetitive task, and it was just like all day long, the same task. You know, you run into factories where there's some variation, but this had zero variation. But then when you looked at the way that one operator was working, and then looked at the next operator, we all looked at that next operator and we were like, we couldn't believe how fast she was at what she was doing. She looked
I know
like,
exactly what you're talking about now. Yeah,
yeah,
she was
you
fast.
do know.
And
And
the other
I
ones look slow.
Yeah, and I thought about like this would be a prime example of where, you know, Frank could come in with equipment that would actually be able to replicate what that incredibly fast operator was able to achieve. You know, and not to get rid of those operators, but to be able to better utilize them in the plant at a job where they can make a huge difference. Because I can tell you that job that we were watching, that was not, good labor utilization.
And that's what we're really talking about here is labor utilization, automation utilization,
Yeah.
enables us to utilize that labor, as you said, in a far more effective and efficient way. Skill sets and skill sets of people um, certainly is vitally important within our industry today, no doubt.
And that's going to have to evolve, right? It's a new breed of talent in a sense that's going to have to understand both perspectives from actual labor and then the machine itself. So exciting times. I'm going to bring up, right, I'll play devil's advocate again. I think the biggest hesitation we see, right, Per and Justin mentioned the 90s and the 2000s. Frank, you were talking about even before that, we walk into factories that they're still using the same cutters and they're just looking to make investments into somewhat modern cutters, never mind going to the next step. But that hesitation is typically the upfront investment, right? The cost of any of these machines that could do automation or robotics. But I think you guys know the return that it generates having seen it firsthand. So if you kind of speak to that a little bit, I think that'd be helpful for the audience.
Well, certainly nobody has an unlimited supply of money, and we all have to be concerned with what is the ROI. But I would say on the majority of automated systems, virtually all of them that we have to work on, people are looking at a payback period of 12 to 18 months. They certainly all want it to be 12 months or less. And in many instances, we can. I think I would be completely blown away if somebody said to me, well, we could stand a 2-year payback or a 3-year payback, especially in today's market.
Yep.
I think that automation technology can be integrated and can be integrated effectively. And as you said, if we save 1%, 2%, it's a tremendous amount of money. So I think it's a step-by-step walk in order to automate facilities today. I don't think it's we got to change everything within your facility. I think that you start with the low-hanging fruit and then you move on forward from there. Automation and technology are possible to integrate into textile sewn products here in America. There's no doubt about it. Automation is being utilized in other parts of the world. So we in America need to be concerned with that because these are people we'll be competing with, no doubt. Integrating shop floor control into what we do in automation and technology integration is a natural, a complete natural in the fact that we need to be able to have the controls at our fingertips. We need to be able to say to the machine, as Justin has described earlier, what's coming to me next? If we have an armed type of robot, we can literally set the end of arm tooling into a tray, if you will, dispose of it, and pick up another end of arm tooling to do another operation utilizing the same exact robot arm only we have different tooling. We as humans have very, very dexterous fingers, hands, those kind of things. It's hard to replicate with automation. So that's the intervarm tooling that we're talking about. There are things being developed today. Some even look like our heads, which have haptic technology in the actual hand itself, camera technology, and sensors in the hand, so that it becomes more dexterous like a human, rather than a hard piece of metal or a vacuum suction grip or a needle and defector or any number of different tools. Each of those tools are important, but it's all based on the product that we're picking up. Is it a woven good? Is it a knit good? Is it a 6-ounce good or a 12-ounce good or a 14 3/4 ounce good? All of those things are important.
Now, Frank, you've mentioned materials handling. We talked about a little bit less waste. I think in perspective from the systems side, with Per and Justin and their team's done a great job of, we've got everything from a digital perspective from the software, whether it's manual labor or robotics. You said it before, right? It's feeding that information. So you're tracking everything again in real time. So the consumption of those materials is now tracked in real time, fed back to systems like ERP, where you're doing the purchasing of those materials. So another big driver we've seen is more accurate purchasing of the materials that are needed, right? Less over purchasing, under purchasing. We've got clients in the uniform space, survival gear space that sometimes they come across expired materials. They get these systems in place. That happens a lot less. You go to pull an expired material, it throws your whole floor off, right? You're trying to shift. What are we going to do today? What order should we put in front? How are we going to balance everything? So just having these things in place, helping avoid some of that. Again, just calling out some of these areas of return, and one of the topics being optimizing materials management. Well, I don't know if we've got any questions coming in or anything we want to turn our attention to.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if you guys are ready to go and answer some questions. Let me move to the next slide. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys. Some great insight and great discussions. Let me pull up my Zoom. Okay. First question. Can you guys share some more success stories where automation has effectively addressed labor shortages in apparel manufacturing?
Frank, do you want to go first?
Sure. Glad to, Justin. I think all of us can probably give you some success stories because it's what we do every day. We've already talked about during this presentation some of them. So facility came to me a number of years ago. I can't tell you who because of NDAs, those kind of things. And they basically had 350 people. They said, we know we have to automate because we can't find people. We can't find skill sets of people because over the last 2.5 generations, we've lost a lot of people, people who had the skill sets. So we have to automate in order for us to maintain our business. So we took the approach of looking at what are from operation 1 through the end of their line. What steps could we take and at what manner? It took 2 years, cost about $1 million. But of the $1 million that they spent, we were able to go from about 300 people to about 50 people.
Wow.
Moving from 300 people to 50 people and spending $1 million, you would say, wow, there's no possible way that we could do that. We don't have $1 million. Their payback was less than 12 months. In this case, it was actually 10 months. So in 10 months, they had spent $1 million. They got their money back and started making a profit on their investment and doing it not with 300 people, which they'll continue to pay on and on if they stayed that way, but rather with 50 total people. It didn't happen overnight. It took some time to develop. And in building automation, technology integration, integrating shop floor control into what you do each day, it's a walk. It's a crawl, walk, run, taking one step at a time, being cognizant of what you have accomplished, and building quality into every step of the path. That's one that I can tell you. Justin, I'm sure you might want to talk about someone else.
Yeah,
Our whole world revolves around, saving and reducing the need for as many operators to produce the same or more finished goods. Of course, we're very careful about speaking specific names of companies, but we have, every customer of ours is a prime example of how you can achieve that. And we have many customers that they see savings in different areas. Like I remember one of our customers, they got into shop floor specifically to save the 15 minutes per day that employees were wasting queuing at the time clocks. Nothing else, right? But they ended up getting all of these extra features and functions with it that ended up allowing them to catapult their business. So, like one example was, keeping like material lots together. Um, they were, producing goods. In this case, they were boots, and the materials had to be from the same lot. And they also had to separate each pair of shoes and bring them back together further down the line. And they had to make sure they brought the right pair back together because of those fabric lots. So we have so many different examples like that. Most of our customers actually end up seeing an ROI in, under 6 months, with the software savings, not just there, but also with like HR. Our HR overhead usually reduces by 60 to 80%. We generally will improve quality by, 40, 50, 60% just because many companies don't have anything that tracks quality control, and quality is just part of our core feature. So it's built in, and it's transactional, so it's part of your actual transactions. Anthony, do you want to dive a little bit further into this?
but yeah, the one story I was telling before about that 1% increase in quality, and thinking it was kind of nominal. That same client in the uniform space saw a 24% increase in revenue, right? So to Frank's point, they didn't lower the bodies; they kept the same amount of operators, but they were able to produce more, right? They attribute it to the greater throughput achieved by automating the steps in between. And these are clients that are thrilled, right? Because 24% increase in revenue, and I mean we get to do these return analysis using real floors data every day. A lot of times we see, Frank was saying spending $1 million. Well, we see annual profit increases of $1 million. We go down to even the operator level at times, and you're seeing a few $100,000 per operator increase. So it's hard to deny, right? Especially when you've got all the automation and software tracking it in real time. We've got a lot of data at our fingertips to prove it. So again, what we do is exciting because we get results for the customers and the manufacturers, but we can prove it before they even make that investment. So trying to find that balance so they know that, hey, there's little risk here and a lot of reward. Used to be, hey, we don't know if this is going to work. Well, now we've got the evidence. So I appreciate everybody coming together to share that today. Emily, I'm sure there's more. We probably got one or two questions. Rick, how are we on time?
Yeah, we're on
You're
time.
fine on time. Emily, I have a question. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So here in the US, we just had an election week. So I don't know if this is actually kind of a political question, but some of the things that came into my mind as you were all talking, I was like, well, the US, has some laws that we have to manufacture certain uniforms here domestically, right? So there's kind of that piece, but then there's also just this piece of, and people might be scared that the incoming administration is going to make it more expensive to bring in foreign goods because of the tariff way of thinking that Trump, has been talking about. So there's some of these things are spinning in my head as far as our specific industry. But it seems to me automation is something that's an amazing tool if companies are interested in reshoring or growing domestic manufacturing, because that's what's automation. So there's good news, bad news in there, right? And I'm not asking us to have a political discussion. I'm just saying it. What are you seeing out there when people talk to you about this? Either the equipment that Frank is talking about, or the software side that Aptean delivers. as far as domestic versus, no, we want this for our plant in Mexico, or we want this for our plant in India, or, and I know
Yeah.
a couple of names on here are, representing factories that are not within the U.S. continental states. So, I'm just wondering how this might affect domestic production versus worldwide production. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I actually have a few thoughts on it. I obviously a big reason for, creating tariffs and different things like that are to bring industry back to the United States. And we've been trying to bring industry back to the United States for years. And, I think that probably over the past 5 to 10 years, we've seen greater success in that. Maybe because of administration, maybe because customer demands, more personalized or custom type of production. Something that,
Speed to market. Right.
yeah, exactly. And we do a
Speed to
lot of that.
market.
We have quite a few customers who, you could order something from a website that is, personalized with your dog's, face on a shirt or something like that and get it delivered in 3 days. Well, that's not coming from overseas. There's no way. So we have to be able to make that domestically. And one thing that I'd be curious about with the tariffs are the tariffs going to apply to raw materials, or are they going to apply to finished goods? Which
Yeah, we don't
obviously
know.
we don't
Or
know.
or will they happen at all? Nobody really knows, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a real fear, right? It's warranted.
Yeah.
And we saw a big shift with that administration, thinking back through just in the early days of 2020, dare I say the word pandemic, right? We saw a lot of nearshoring, but we did see a lot of increases in domestic production. And people talking about how hard it was to close that labor gap. So again, the automation piece, all that helps drive that. But to the overseas manufacturers, right, with them investing properly in these technologies, and like Frank said, a lot of them are already doing it, but it does actually help lower the costs of the goods because the labor costs are going down. So if they make the
Yeah.
investment properly, right, both
Yeah.
sides remain competitive. So, it can be a win situation overall. It's going to be a big driver, in my opinion, to having us work a bit smarter, right, to tackle that because us as a whole, right, we got to get together as an industry and make sure that we continue thriving. And these investments become a very important part of that. And again, I'll go back to this, everybody's always hesitant to make that investment. When you look out the outside economic factors, the political factors, again, big driver to say, okay, we need to be prepared to scale and sustain, and this really does put them in a position to do that.
And another question I had made a note of, I assume you have also then routines where if I don't have that $1 million capital right now to invest, you have ways that I could more slowly ramp over, 1 to 5 years.
Yep.
And, so that, yes, at the end, I've invested several $1 million, right? But you've got approaches that, because if I only invest, 2% per year is my budget to grow my technology and automation, or 5% is what I reinvest in machinery each year. You have ways between Frank and you all on approaching that.
Yeah, this is where Per and his team come in, right? And you think about we've got manufacturers that have multiple plants, right? You look at a phased approach. How do we create a return that's going to pay for the investment along the way? We've been very successful at that, where Per and his team come in and maybe do a line or a zone, right, and get return that then pays for everything itself. And obviously, you start to realize the return before you even made the full investment. I'd say about 60% of the time when we do it this way, if not, closer to probably 90%. I'm just throwing that out there off the cuff. But again, Per, right, that's been very successful, kind of phasing that out. Also limits the resources, even from a labor bandwidth, right, from engineers or anybody that may need to get involved or start to learn while they implement, right? That's a big investment in the people as well. So, just allows them to do that in a crawl, walk, run, excuse me, type of scenario. But yeah, you're spreading the cost of that investment out while you realize the return.
You're able to try before you buy, in essence.
Yeah, no, Anthony, you're absolutely right. And that's the traditional way for us to do things, really, no matter what, right? Because you're taking big steps if you're investing in technology. you go from having really not much technology on the manufacturing floor today to introduce a real-time data collection tool. We're usually taking it step by steps, taking an area at a time, a department at a time, one plant at a time, and make sure everything is up and going and ready. And the transfer of knowledge has been there from sort of our team and our experts to the customer side of things. And that also helps the rollouts to be more efficient. But I also just wanted to comment on the previous question you had, Rick. We talk about tariffs and we talk about nearshoring, offshoring, or making things here in our own backyards, right? And that's kind of one of the, whichever way the industry takes, that's one of the main benefits with having data is it does, if you have the proper data in your processes, it doesn't really matter if your manufacturing facility is in South Carolina, in Mexico, in Colombia, or India, because if you have the data collection point in your process, you can get that sort of real-time reporting to wherever you are. And that's kind of one of the beauties of where the technology is today, where you can get access to the data from anywhere.
Yeah.
I can sit in my office in Atlanta and see my manufacturing facility in Honduras and see how they're doing on a daily basis, weekly basis, but also on a real-time basis. And that's kind of where the technology is today, where you have that insight into your manufacturing operations today through technology.
Yeah.
So, and the other thing I wanted to mention earlier, when looking at some of Frank's videos, we've been going at this for many years now, Frank and myself and Justin and the others, is that I feel that as individuals in different companies, we've all been focused on solving our sort of problem over the years, whereas maybe our focus on the data collection side has been to how can we help operators get more efficient by motivational tools and reporting and raise their efficiency. And Frank has been focusing on how can we make a machine more efficient, or one operation more efficient, or a cutting room more efficient. Well, where the technology is today is that everything is coming together. We're now communicating in between our different systems and our different machines and our different softwares. So the information is now readily available at your fingertips at any given time. For the automation process, where software can drive automation in a different way than it could 10 years ago and 15 years ago and 20 years ago, but also from a data perspective, where we can monitor and observe and report on output from these robots and these machines and these automated cells, right? So I think the key is really how the data is all coming together.
Nice.
And well, Rick, I'm going to tie back to your question real quick, because we've got a Berkshire. Okay.
Go ahead.
Wrap it up.
We've got a Berkshire Hathaway company that's a client of ours, and their CIO, they open new plants quite frequently, which is not that common these days. But when they do, they make this investment up front because it then pays for the opening of the plant. Those were their words. And buying these technologies, right, the software, allowing that return to then drive the needle on purchasing more machines. So they just get better and better.
Makes sense. Yes. And nice to have the pockets of Berkshire Hathaway to accomplish that, right? But wow, Emily, any final word? Otherwise, I'm just going to say thank you to everyone for coming. Oh, here you can you take it up, take it out, Emily.
I'll wrap us up and throw it back to you, Rick. So, of course, I want to extend a big thank you to NAUMD and Rick for helping host today's webinar. And of course, our presenters, Anthony, Justin, Per, and Frank, for sharing valuable insights. And then, of course, thank you to everybody who joined us today. We truly appreciate your time and the opportunity to engage, with professionals across the industry. If you guys would like some more information or, wish to speak to the team directly, please, visit our website at aptean.com/apparel, or feel free to scan the QR code and request a personalized demo. So I'll hand things back over to Rick. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time for talking to us today. It was very interesting. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.